Hello, everyone. Welcome to our final Next Wave webinar of the year, featuring the performance topic with which all CVCs struggle. So let's get started. I'm Liz Arrington. I am your fearless moderator, as well as the co-founder and managing director of the GCV Institute. And I'm also the architect of our GCV Keystone CVC benchmarking platform. And in this webinar, we are going to explore the challenges of capturing the interplay of meaningful CVC performance metrics from a program level flowing down to the different teams within a CVC. We have a stellar panel with us made up of representatives from 3 luminary CVCs, TDK Ventures, Shell Ventures, and Echo Health Ventures. They bring both cross-sector and global perspectives, and they are the highly valued co-chairs of GCV's global platform community of practice. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in a couple of minutes after I set the stage with a bit of context and market data. Looking at context for CVC, we have found that a distinguishing characteristic of today's high-performing CVC programs is the adoption of what we call an end-to-end investing approach, which is fundamental both to portfolio financial performance as well as the delivery of that end game strategic impact, which is needed to persuade the parents of the continuous value of the CVC programs. And although some programs like InQtel have been doing it much longer, we've seen over the past 5 to 7 years the establishment of formal corporate venture business development, portfolio development, or platform functions, which are tasked with an arm to drive parent engagement and to reduce the lead time to impact for investments. And we've seen key elements of CVC platforms are, first of all, a dedicated senior professional team, as well as seamless integration of processes with both investment and parent operations. We see high performance ecosystem partnering programs, both internally focused and externally focused. And we see an up-leveled strategic portfolio management function, which often includes the emergence of what we call a strategic COO, who can assess and communicate performance and strategic impact. Dave Stevenson, who was of Merck Global Health Innovation Fund, who was featured in our August webinar, is one such example. So while the start point is always the need to address parent motivations or expectations for the CVC, as we have all seen, the criticality of effective performance management and communication can really be amplified by market oscillations and environmental changes. So what does performance mean for a CVC? We see all CVCs at some point in their evolution will be asked to demonstrate the innovation impact of their programs and portfolios. But at the same time, they ultimately will be held to some level of financial accountability. So we've seen that CVC program quality and performance are typically communicated through 3 categories of metrics, which are dynamically informed by the charter of the program, the operating model, the maturity phase, and the parent culture. And importantly, performance is never static. It's always going to change. The first category of metrics we see are operational or corporate venturing program quality metrics that really demonstrate the foundational ability of the program, of the team, to architect and to scale an impactful professional unit. These metrics are often activity-based, and in the first few years, it's really important to emphasize the corporate venturing program development process towards evidence of quality. The second category of metrics are competitive financial metrics, which are really seen as table stakes for program survival. Our GCV Keystone benchmarks show that 52% of CVCs now measure and target VC level financial returns, and 75% are expected to make money. So while early wins are always helpful, we see that financial metrics grow in importance with CVC program maturity and scale, and are certainly critical for more independent operating models. Then the third category, strategic value, is the raison d'etre for most CVCs. But defining impactful strategic metrics is really seen as the holy grail. Our research has shown that strategic metrics often combine qualitative measures like insights, ecosystem development, culture change, societal or industry transformation, and quantitative measures that can include both activity-based KPIs and parent commercial impact metrics. CVCs, as I said, often start by tracking activity-based indicators, such as the number of startups assessed, the number of briefing sessions, the percentage of portfolio companies engaged with the parent. But ultimately, these KPIs don't capture the true value of the insights or of the advice provided, and are unlikely to resonate in a way that a compelling narrative or an anecdotal portfolio company parent success story might. And while commercial impact is highly valued, responsibility for delivering commercial results is often shared with the parent corporation, making it challenging to define, track, and communicate performance. But somehow all of these elements must get boiled down into a few key categories described by activities, impact, and compelling storytelling. So let's turn to our panel, who can start by introducing themselves and their programs, and then we'll ask them to walk us through how their units are addressing the CVC performance conundrum and what sort of frameworks do they use that distill performance into categories that resonate with key stakeholders and that can be easily, or at least consistently, tracked and reported on an ongoing basis. So we will encourage all of you to feel free to raise your own questions about the challenges that you are facing. And we'd encourage you to use the Q&A function, not the chat, to submit any questions. So let's turn to our panels. And I'd like to start by asking each of you to introduce, your program, what it does, where it invests, how big it is, and how old it is, and then a little bit about your own personal role and tenure with the firm. And so, Suzanne, you are at the top of my list of boxes. So why don't you go first?
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm happy to participate today. So I'm with Echo Health Ventures, and Echo invests in healthcare innovation on behalf of 4 different Blues plans, which include Arkansas, Tennessee, Cambia Health Solutions, which is in the Pacific Northwest, as well as Arkansas Blue Cross Blue Shield. So we look at healthcare innovation that can work with the different plans within their ecosystem and work with them to find that innovation, invest, and in some cases, bring that in commercially. So we were established in 2016, so are having our 10-year anniversary next year. So pretty excited to kind of pass that milestone, or at least be in it. And we were started with a very specific mission to not just find innovation, but find innovation that can actually move the needle on healthcare. So what can transform the market in a positive way? Not just think about how do you move different dollars from ecosystem member to ecosystem member. So we spend a lot of time thinking through how will our investments impact the market and ultimately the members that these plans serve. We have, at the beginning of the year, we had 32 portfolio companies. We've had 6 exits this year, so it's been very, very busy for us, which is great to see that movement because it's been pretty static for the last few years. About 550 under management that we transact with, and we're typically in the top quartile of measurement for overall VCs, as you mentioned. We hold ourselves not to just CVC standards, but typical VC standards for our financial return. And then we have this dual mandate of strategic engagement as well. And that's really my role at Echo. I'm part of the Echo Health Advisors team and run that group. And our whole reason for being is to look at, measure, and grow our strategic engagement between the portfolio companies and those plans that we serve. And so we have a number of different measurements we'll get into, but we've been looking at how do we stick to measurements that we've had for the last 10 years, but also think about innovation in that aspect as well.
All right, Geeta, tell us about TDK Ventures and your role.
Thank you, Liz, and greetings to everyone that's here. I'm Geeta Dolatia. My role is as a portfolio program director at TDK Ventures, and I've been with TDK Ventures for more than 4 years. TDK Ventures is a deep tech corporate venture capital arm of the Japanese conglomerate, mainly in the areas of electronic components and battery manufacturing. It's more than 90 years old. Rather, I should say it is going to be 90 years old very soon. The corporate VC arm was established in 2019, so we are fairly young, about 6 years. We are an early stage deep tech CVC, mostly investing in seed to Series B. We have $500 million in assets under management and two categories of funds. Funds 1, 2, and 3 have a global investment mandate in energy and digital transformation. And we have a newer fund called Fund EX1 with a sustainability mandate with a focus geographically on EU and North America. The ventures team, we are in 4 different locations, SJC, Boston, Bangalore, London, and we also have team members in Tokyo. Our core areas of investment focus generally fall under the EX and DX categories. And in DX, it's in areas of compute and connectivity, IoT, space tech, robotics, mobility. And on the EX side, it's various aspects of energy and sustainability ecosystems, such as battery materials, battery processing, novel materials, renewable energy, material circularity, decarbonization. So it's, as you can see, pretty broad mandate. And being a deep tech, an early stage CVC, I noticed that we really need to work on enabling synergies with our parent corporation and the portfolio companies, especially because we don't have a mandate that we have these already set in place prior to investment. There is a general expectation of engagement, but not a mandate. And so it becomes important to have a focused approach to that, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, in the ensuing discussions. So my team, I belong to the platform team, and specifically it's called the portfolio program team. And I have 4 other team members that enable synergies between our portfolio companies and TDK. And we are getting close to 50 portfolio companies across geographies. And so and in terms of TDK team members, we have close to 6 to 16. So that's a lot to process. And I would say thus far we have enabled about 400 introductions, and it's always a work in progress, like Suzanne said, and it requires continuous monitoring. And yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Right. Okay. Sure. Tell us about Shell Ventures and your role.
Yeah, thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Thank you for having us. So yeah, Shell Ventures, we were established in 1996, and the role so already quite a bit, quite some time basically. And the role that I play within that is the business development manager. So I'm looking after all the team that looks at deploying all the technologies that we've invested in. That function is not as old as 1996, but we'll come to that later, I'm pretty sure. So what we do is we make like the others here, minority investments, basically looking at innovative and scalable business models, new technologies, really to help basically with the biggest challenges in the energy sector. So energy as a starter, of course, energy, the access to energy, emissions, technical challenges, you name it. And basically that is so broad that if you dive a little bit deeper into what verticals those are, then you can think about power, mobility, emissions management, obviously digital infrastructure. There's anything these days, any hardware, anything has a digital component. But also resource management. and that allows us to be quite support quite a diverse range of emerging and innovative sectors. So like a lot of things, electrification trends, of course, where we play in carbon removal, low carbon fuels, biogas, just to name a few. So we do basically invest along the full spectrum, although we have a preference for, as basically our sweet spot is around Series A, maybe B. So that's also therefore the ticket sizes are probably in the order of 2 to 5 million as a starter, but we have obviously commit a lot more to support the company throughout the life cycle. But we can easily do higher ticket sizes if that's required or if that makes sense for that particular investment.
Okay.
Fund size is probably a bit similar to what my colleagues here have mentioned. I think we're around 600 at the moment, but that's similar size. Yeah, thanks. I'll hand it over back to you, Liz.
Yeah. Well, we have a question in the chat that I'd like to kind of wind into a little bit more, context setting for your 3 programs. Gita, we heard from you that you are deep tech and you're fairly early stage investing, purely ahead of the business. Whereas I think in the case of Echo, and it sounds like Shell, it's a little bit more stage agnostic, where you'll invest early, but you can actually go up to almost growth equity level investments within your mandate. Okay, great. All right. Well, let's talk about the whole idea of the end-to-end investing approach, and look at each of your programs and talk about how that's actually enabled within your CVC unit. What are all the different pieces? I think you all have investment and BD teams. Do you have portfolio management teams? How does the structure work, and how many people do you have? So, Church, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. So we basically the broad overview of that is that we are not just a source of capital. We really like to be there to help out the portfolio companies and unlock the deployment and strategic collaboration value that comes with that. So apart from a professional investment team that we have, which is globally located on all well, not all of the innovative business ecosystem, but quite a few of them, like San Francisco, Boston, Houston, London, the Netherlands, India, China, just to name a few places where we're active. That's the professional investment team. But next to that, we have a platform team. So we call that the business development team. But essentially what we do is we look at, it's a team of implementation experts that look at how do we deploy these technologies across the group, either directly through our supply chain, but we also look at introducing them to some of our customers, our more our bigger customers. And then, of course, next to that, as the program evolved and is growing, and you've got a whole portfolio of early stage, and to some that you've held a little bit longer, you also have now like a real portfolio management team in there that does a lot of the also the research, but also portfolio analysis, and basically does a lot of the operational elements that come with a CVC unit and help us run our business effectively.
Okay. What about you, Gita? It seems like when programs hit that kind of 500 million AUM mark, then the portfolio management piece becomes important as well. So how are you set up within TDK Ventures?
So for TDK Ventures, first of all, it's a separate fund, so we are not investing out of the balance sheet. Our hiring also has been primarily outside of TDK, and that's something that's important because um, when you have a separate fund and you also have most of the members who don't come from the TDK ecosystem, it becomes very important to have a dedicated team that can understand the needs of both the portfolio companies and understand the framework of the different TDK business groups, which are very global and enable collaborations. So right from the beginning, even when we were in Fund One, our setup has been platform team and the investment team. And in the platform section, I would say that you can categorize it into two groups. So the engagement team works with either startups that we are looking at for investment or the portfolios that we have already invested in and enables collaborations with the parent company. But then we also have the scaling team that primarily provides value to our portfolio companies, which could be things like marketing, guidance on financial help, where to go for non-dilutive funding that could come from various government organizations. So all of these other things like HR, help. Um, so those are the two functions. And there is in the engagement team, we have kind of split it into two groups. One group works with the investment team on looking for potential synergies, pre-investment, and that feedback from the TDK business groups, which would be along the lines of, we find this technology interesting. I think there is value to collaborating with this team. So it's more at that level, not really in identifying exactly what a pilot or a evaluation would be, or in identifying or in committing to such an engagement, right? So it's more at a higher level that is presented at the IC along with the investment side of things. So we have what is called a King of the Hill analysis to find the best companies to invest in. And it is based on three categories. The first one is that it should do societal good. So we keep away from technologies that won't fall in that bin. And if that is taken as a given, then the other two are financial returns, like I think Suzanne had mentioned, financial returns that are comparable to what a VC firm would expect. So that's one part, and the other part is already built into it, which is synergy, enabling synergies with TDK. And globally, if we feel that this is the best company that is in this sector that fits all of this, that's when we even take it to the IC. Beyond that, once the investment is approved, it comes to my team, and I have four team members. They're also located in different locations. So we have team members here in San Jose, we have team member in Boston and London, and we also have these programs like fellowship programs within TDK, which is very valuable, where we have these um, enterprising people inside TDK that can come and spend 6 months with us and get exposure to the investment world and exposure to the engagement aspects as well. And so we have had team members who have come and joined our team specifically to enable engagements, and it has been very valuable. So that's where we are in terms of team structure for synergy specifically.
Great, great. Thank you. Well, Suzanne, if I could get you to talk a little bit about how Echo's structured, and then dive into the question that Gita just answered around how the investment team and the Echo Health Advisors team align both, pre and post investment.
Yeah, and it's fascinating hearing each other's structure, because I think we have things that are similar and things that are slightly different too. So Echo has three main teams. So I'll just start with our operations team. That's where legal and treasury they do our valuations, they run our board meetings, the transactions. We have a general counsel that's in there. It's kind of all of our operations. Then we have our strategic investment team, which is what you would expect from a typical VC. It's people that are ex-bankers, ex-private equity, almost all from different pieces, more of the financial market than the healthcare market. And they sit on the boards, they do the due diligence of the deals, and help manage those companies to some sort of transaction in the future. And then there's my team called Echo Health Advisors. And I would say all three teams, we have almost equal amounts of resources. So we have 6 to 7 people on each team. My team works both with investment and operations team very closely. We have people on my team that come from the health plans or some aspect of the healthcare ecosystem to bring that knowledge in. We tend to work very closely with our investment team, both on identification for new innovation, the strategic themes that we want to work on, and then we're part of the deal team. Every time a new company comes in, it is kind of championed by someone from the investment team, but there's someone from my team that is assigned to each deal, and we take it through to its conclusion, whatever that is. And then if it gets approved, people on my team are then assigned to do the portfolio management as well. So we kind of cover all the aspects. It's fascinating to hear that some people are kind of pre-investment, and then there's portfolio management. I think we've looked at different structures, but right now people kind of do both. So they get the deal side and then they get the portfolio management side as well. And it's kind of a mix of when we write memos, my team owns certain pieces of the memo, for instance, particularly around impact, particularly working closely with the investment team on what is the TAM or the SAM within the organizations that we serve and those plan stakeholders. And we then write individual portions of how an investment could fit or the feedback from each of our plans. So someone on my team is assigned in particular to each of the 4 plans to be their advocate, to know their strategies, to understand who are the key stakeholders that we should work with, who do you go to for feedback and understanding of a particular market. And then that gets put into the investment memo. And then, as I said, carried through to the portfolio management side. If they become part of our portfolio, generally the person who is part of the deal team then is kind of the assigned owner from my team, along with an investment representative, to help that new portfolio company understand how they can then navigate those plans. And we do a fair amount. I think this is why we hire people from the healthcare, either the plans or the industry. We'll do a lot of value proposition work with those portfolio companies to say, if you're selling into a large health plan, let us help prepare you and accelerate in those meetings with the plans of how you present, what your ROI looks like, who you're talking to, things like that really hopefully save time on both sides. So that's kind of how we organize to then lead to some of our strategic metrics, which are that pull through on the commercial side. But I think we ensure that our value is kind of broader to those 4 plans. So we're also helping these portfolio companies understand how to sell into the market generally. And it just overall helps with their scale and how quickly they can find clients and success in the market.
Okay. So, Chair, tell us about how your team and the investment team work on the kind of end-to-end investing approach.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, it's great to hear Suzanne speak about that because I think there's quite a bit of similarities here. Because indeed, what we do is that let's say halfway through the pre-investment stage, we basically assign someone from my team to be part of that, the deal team. Now, originally what I mentioned, we have an investment team, we have a BD and a platform team and a portfolio management team, but in the investment process, there's people from all of that are part of the deal team. But the investment team is normally accountable for that part. But we are responsible, similar to what Suzanne is saying, we're responsible for part of that memo, that investment memo, that specifically looks at the how do we deploy this, what is the size of the prize for us, and things like that. It's important. We feel it's important for two reasons. One is we can upfront really align with the business and try and see whether there is an opportunity. And then once the investment is done, if it all goes ahead, we can hit the ground running. We don't have to sort of start then. We get a very good idea of what that potential actually is before we do the investment. And then third, I think even if we don't do the investment, because there's other criteria other than the potential commercial deals, there's other criteria, maybe for instance valuation, why we won't invest. That doesn't mean that the technology or the solution isn't important or a good fit with the business. So they can still go ahead, and we can still basically then. We've done the introductions. We've helped them. They can still move ahead, and even though at the end of the day we don't invest, they might still have a commercial agreement come out of this. And then post investment, we sort of we don't take over, but we basically we help them with following up on those leads, finding new leads, on opportunities, either like say with our own operations, but also in our supply chain, or with our customers. And yeah, I mean, it could be all kinds of things, but we try and help them then on a day-to-day basis. Someone is assigned to look to sort of their primary focal point for that. And
so looking at all of you are describing, somewhat similar approaches where up front you in the pre-investment process, you do work on kind of the strategic value hypothesis. And, what percentage of your investments do you think you actually are able to do some level of, ROI analysis or of, more explicit impact analysis with, working with the portfolio company and the business? So Suzanne, what do you think?
Well, we committed last year, and we probably started mid-24 to say within our investment memos, we will have an kind of impact section where we will try to analyze or at least have an estimate of what we think the impact could be if this company engaged with our 4 plan members based on their size, their market, and the value. And it's a huge range because we are stage agnostic. We have early stage, we have growth stage. The growth stage are a lot easier because they generally have known proof points, and we can use those as proxies and put those through. The VC, we make a lot of assumptions, and we note those assumptions, and we caveat them. So we take some liberties there, but try to at least frame it. And we've done that for every investment that's gone through IC for both new and follow-on. So we've probably had up to, I'd say 10 or 15 sizing, and we did it prior. We're just a lot more systematic about it now that it's a part of all our investment memos.
Geeta, what about you when you have more of an early stage focus?
Yes, so ours is early stage investment, seed to Series B, primarily clustering around Series A and Series B, I would say. So when you're in early stage, that too in the deep tech area, at that stage, you probably haven't retired your technology risks. So that becomes an important part of the company's growth. And then you also have to think about the next part, which is scaling. And I think this is truly where CVC can come in as a superpower. Um, uh, Given that TDK is a deep tech company, there are many subject matter experts within the company that can provide insights to the portfolios, and also in terms of scaling, um, that's where TDK really plays. They make like millions of components a month, and so a lot of the best practices for scaling, even though our portfolios may not necessarily be in the manufacturing space, is something that they can certainly learn. Um, Your other question was that about ROI. So I would say that ROI is truly at the financial ROI is at the exit, or which could be IPO. Some of our portfolios have IPO'd, or a merger and acquisition, which also we have had examples, including one recently in the com space. But there is also intangible ROIs that come through discussions and synergy exploration, both for the portfolio and for TDK. And one of the goals of setting up TDK Ventures is that TDK continues to be at the forefront of technology and business. As a 90-year-old company, they have pivoted multiple times, and they should be able to know what is out there that could upend their existing business in the coming years. And so investments and through engagements, they get a vantage point view of what is truly cutting edge. And through engagements, they learn by working together with the portfolio teams. They really learn um, what is changing, what they need to focus on. So these are things that are hard to put a dollar value on in terms of return on investment, but they are very important return on investments. Scaling help that our portfolio teams get through these discussions, and sometimes the ability to expand into newer market areas, which may not have been a core expertise or focus for the portfolio initially, either directly through TDK or through the channel partners. That's also a big ROI. And these are ROIs that are beyond what comes through a direct
Right.
pilot or a deployment or a direct engagement through a JDA or a process. So I would say it's multifunctional, and we need to look at them all holistically.
So Chuck, I think your team, explicitly does a lot more of the implementation work within the parent running, POCs and pilots and
Yeah.
to what extent do you pre-investment develop, beyond the strategic value hypothesis, the any sort of assumptions to test about ROI, and then after the fact?
Yeah, so I echo a little bit what I've heard before here, because especially if you do early stage investments, and our sweet spot is around Series A, there's still technology risks, and really your deployment, your next few years of deployment really centers around proof of concepts,
Right.
and not really full scale deployment. However, we invest in the company, and we're there for the long run. We're not here to see for the next 1-2 year and then see what if it doesn't work out, life is tough, let's move on. We try to help out, and so we also look at, okay, if this all works out, and even if we go through multiple tips or whatever, what is the long-term real value that we can get to that? Now that becomes very difficult, and highly subjective, based on all the assumptions that Suzanne also mentioned. But so we are fairly conservative, but that is a little bit to do with what we promise. And as a result, we have luckily been able to outperform that quite a bit. But for the strategic values that we measure it is really around, we do try to find what are the cost savings or the extra revenue that we get from this, and try to really identify which of these technologies have made that happen. And those are, and we really try to quantify that. We don't do that for all of them because it is quite a bit of work, albeit that you'll still find that a business signs a contract with the portfolio company, there is a business investment decision required there, and therefore they will have done some analysis on their expenditure and before they sign the contract. So there is something there, but equally important, like what Gita was saying, is the insights that you gain from your proof of concepts, and sometimes the insights that you get purely from the investments, where there is not even a proof of concept because it's just too, it's not close enough to what we currently do that we can do a proof of concept, but it is adjacent enough that we are interested. But there it's really measured in forms of how many insight notes that we share and that we have with our strategy teams, either in the business or corporate. Things like that we do as well. I guess the importance of this to our internal audience, I mean, at the same time, we also have the financial metrics, of course. I think the importance to that is really depends a little bit on who you talk to. If I speak to the CFO, he will look at the financial returns and the IRR and the MOIC and the things like that. If I speak to the business unit managers or whatever, they like to see what the strategic return is. So it is, my experience is that you need both. You need both for your internal audience, but you also need both for your external audience. I mean, if you, again, I've heard that before as well, but you have to get some financial return, because at the end of the day, you're not investing yourself alone. You're together with others, and financial VCs, maybe in a strategic VC, CVC, you can get to a point where they might accept not the same type of returns, but a financial VC will have to have the right level of returns to their LPs. So that is a prerequisite. It's a basis that you have to have.
Okay, well, let's take it up one level. And you've all talked about a number of different categories of performance that you measure. So what would you describe as being for your program, its performance framework? What are the categories that are kind of distilled that people talk about? And how do you measure the activities? How do you measure the impact? And I think a number of you have mentioned the importance of being able to tell stories around good examples. So if you could walk through, kind of what is the performance framework for your program? What are the, 4 or 5 categories that are the key things that you measure? So Suzanne, do you want to start with that one?
Sure, and I'll try to keep this fairly succinct because I feel like this is where I spend a lot of my time. So talk for a while on it, but I mean, I think of it almost in levels. Like, the top level is what we're reporting to our board, and that's pretty straightforward. It's our financial returns, and then on the strategic side, we have 2 measurements, which are how many engagements did we sign for the year, and we have a target. Did we hit it or did we not? And then we measure something called portfolio ROI, which is essentially, as you look at those contracts, what is the revenue flowing from the plans to those portfolio companies? There's a multiplier based on our ownership and things like that. But ultimately, it's to show, did those contracts lead to value in the portfolio? So those are our 3 kind of board level metrics. We have then kind of the second level is metrics that we talk about. We don't have targets, we're not measured on them, but they're part of what we talk about every quarter to our board. It's attachment rate, and that is how many of our portfolio companies have at least one contract with one or more of our plans. We run about 80% right now. I think a good range for that is 60 to 80% because we want to be a little ahead. We always talk about that. And we also always report kind of the volume of contracts over time. We've had about, because I just did this for the board slides, over 120 contracts in the last 10 years that we track. And again, we don't have a target for that, but we talk about it. And then I would say there's kind of this third category, which my team tracks. We're trying to figure out the best way to report these or talk about them. And that's everything from just pure revenue without the multipliers. Does that tell us something about depth and scale of these different companies? As we spend more time on impact, we're looking at how do these companies impact affordability or quality measures at the plans with their members. And we are tracking that. We do talk to our board about it, but we don't quite have targets yet. But that's probably something that would elevate to the board level at some point. And there's a whole category of things in there, including case studies where, Geeta, these, as you mentioned, these are stories, they're narratives that need to be talked about, the intangibles that are really important. Did somebody win a deal because they were able to include one of our portfolio companies? Did the portfolio company help create, a market in a new area? So that's kind of the third bucket. So it's really those three buckets, and the third gives us a lot more creativity and to test different things, but the board level we're tracking all the time.
Geeta, what about TDK Ventures? What is your kind of performance framework, and how is it communicated?
TDK Ventures has two performance frameworks. There is something called the team KPIs, and then there are individual KPIs. Team KPIs primarily measure things that would make the team work efficiently, which also includes engagement aspects. I would say that most of our KPIs truly are on the strategic side. We do measure things like number of JDA. So it has evolved over the years. Initially, we felt that the number of JDAs would be a good indicator because we were a young company. We had to get to know the TDK groups, and an NDA would indicate a slightly enhanced level of engagement and deeper technical discussions between the portfolio and the TDK teams. Over the years, that has evolved to number of evaluations, number of JDAs, and now we are beginning to track commercial engagements. So there's the team KPI aspect of it, but then there is also the individual KPI aspect of it, which depends a lot on the person's individual role and responsibility. And for our team, it certainly is number of engagements, number of engagements that lead to a commercial contract and things of that kind. But like you said, it's also very important for these things to happen, there has to be groundwork that needs to be done, which is there has to be a framework for engaging with the parent. And so I've instituted a pretty structured profile for these things. Immediately after investment, we have an introductory meeting. We bring our TDK global teams and enable a Zoom meeting with the portfolio company. They discuss what they are doing and where they can where they think they can work with TDK. And then our team, we have POCs that champion each of the individual portfolios and take it through the end-to-end process. We also publish what is called a quarterly portfolio companies briefing, where we have a checkerboard that tracks all of the engagements between our 66 TDK business groups or team members and the 50 portfolios. So that becomes a kind of a visual high-level map of where we are whether it's an introduction, it has gone beyond that to an evaluation, whether it's a JDA, has become a commercial contract. And this is sent to almost all of the team members that are engaging with us, including corporate officers. We also input our corporate officers pretty frequently. We feel that that's greatly helpful, especially IC members. We have this process where they enable the push from the top because there is no actual mandate to engage. And so all the TDK business groups are, of course, busy with their work. So there has to be either internal champions that are really keen on engaging, or that has to be a push from the top and a push from the bottom, which we try to enable both of those.
So just at a high level, you would have on one axis, you would have all of the business units or key functions. On the other axis, you'd have all the portfolio companies, and then you would have a summary of what the status was with each portfolio, all on one big
all
sheet.
in one, and we track that quarterly. That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And if you look at just quickly up leveling, at a program level, you obviously track financial returns, and then you said you track kind of the strategic or impact related topics, and then you also have a societal impact piece.
Yes, I mean that's part of what we call the code for TDK Ventures, and the C in the code actually stands for contribution to society, and TDK2 has a big focus on this, so that's kind of built into the structure.
Right, and you have something like that, Suzanne, with looking at a healthcare industry level, don't you, with looking at the capital impact work that you're doing?
We are, and that's emerging, but yes, exactly. What is the impact almost at the ecosystem level within healthcare of patients or members to plans to portfolio companies, and how do you assess that value and how do you think about it? And then ultimately, from the earlier stage, how do you use that framework to make the right investments? And this is work that we're doing with Duke Margolis Policy Institute. It's a health institute out of Fuqua Business School in Duke in North Carolina, who's brought together a collection of VCs and private equity in the healthcare market. And they've released some early frameworks, but there's a lot more to come to kind of hold a standard to the industry of, are you investing in things that return value from not just financial return, but broader value to the market and to the members. Okay. More to come on that.
All right, stay tuned. So Cherokee, you want to quickly walk us through Shell Ventures kind of performance framework? What are the key categories, and what's activity, what's impact, and what's storytelling?
Yeah, so I'll try to be brief because I mentioned a few of them already, but I think is roughly two categories. One is the financial return metrics, and as I mentioned, I think it's prerequisite. You have to have that at least in order to be credible in the market, to do these investments. And then second, and that's it's the strategic value that we come out of it, and that could be what we call a deployment value and that consists of cost savings, whether it's OPEX, CAPEX. It could be revenue increase, these kind of things. For the early stage, we try to we don't focus on that one only, because you will get this situation that people will focus on the big numbers only and not try and look at the early stage to grow the next companies that actually going to deliver these nice numbers. So therefore, proof of concepts are also equally weighted on that. We need to make sure that we continue to fill that funnel and grow those companies. And then next to that, I think similar to what I've heard before is we also track, not a KPI, but we track contracted value that we've done. It's not a KPI in our case, because we see that quite a few of the solutions ultimately, once really fully embedded, actually will come through some of our bigger suppliers. So we tend to work with our CP, our contracting group, to ultimately see how can we make sure that this solution then gets properly embedded through our suppliers, that we still get the benefits, but it's a more logic final sustainable solution. And obviously we won't see it as such then in our contracted value. And then insights and storytelling, and whether it's presentations, strategy teams, partaking in some of those strategy workshops of the different businesses, providing insights from that, whether it's a flyover a certain area. There's all kinds of things that we do in order to show that higher level strategic value that you can't put a dollar number on, but is certainly very informative and helpful for the business.
Well, we are almost out of time, so I'm going to ask each of you to give me a quick response to a question about what have been your biggest performance learnings over time, as you know, as your programs have evolved. You know, what's happened, that's what's changed, and what's been the most important thing that you've learned. So Suzanne, you want to tackle that one first?
Sure. I mean, I do think it's important to have leaders on kind of the catching side, whatever that looks like, however you're organized, that can help share your value and can help champion innovation, because it is not easy to work with these smaller organizations, particularly with bigger corporates. And I think having that can really change the attachment and performance trajectory and help scale these organizations in different ways. So finding those champions and working closely with them can be quite useful.
Gita, what about you? What's been your biggest performance learning as the program has evolved?
I think I'll have to echo what Suzanne has said. It's very important to enable and provide a platform where people can meet, both from the portfolio side and the TDK side, and discuss. And we've been successful in having portfolio summits where we bring them together. And that leads to a lot of innovative thinking, which is very hard in a global group to have just through team meetings and very specific points to discuss in a particular meeting, right? So these spontaneous serendipitous discussions are very important. And it's also very important, like Suzanne said, to find the champions within the business groups that are truly motivated to take things to the next level, because a lot of it depends on their initiative. And so this year we actually initiated providing awards to people that truly champion and go out of their way to help our portfolio companies. These two things are my biggest learning in the last 4 years, I would say.
That's a good one. Okay, Jack.
Yeah, I was going to echo the same, but so I'll try and find something else, but I completely concur with what I've been said so far. You need to find that champion in the business that is like the technical expert or whatever, who's a credible champion for that company to actually bring it further. I think the other part that is that I've found over the years is that you'll hear 90 times or 99 times no, and then one time yes. So move on quickly. If someone is not interested or doesn't seem to be interested, just move on, go to the next who might be interested. Don't waste your time on that. But come back with a success story then. So keep track of what they say, come back with a success story, and you'll see sometimes you have just caught them at the wrong time and they are interested, but they just had a bad meeting and they and that's why they were not interested. Yeah, I think in view of time, you can waste a lot of time trying to convince people that are not really there to want to be convinced to use it. So find the right person.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you all for your perspectives and your insights. It's been invaluable to hear kind of how you look at things at a program level from the corporate and communicating with, the highest level stakeholders, but then, digging into the weeds and the challenges around how you communicate that value to the business units and your partners and get them to communicate on your behalf with the value that they receive. So I thank you again so much. I'm going to spend just a couple of quick minutes talking about some upcoming events and things we have going on with GCV, but we do really appreciate all of you spending the time, and you've been invaluable leaders to the industry as chairs of the global platform community. So for people who are interested in learning more about that, we're happy to talk about that as well. So let me quickly tell you a little bit about some upcoming things that are happening at GCV. First of all, if you are interested in working on developing programs and teams for ensuring that your CVC is measuring, communicating the value of your program to corporate parents, we encourage you to consider sending a pod to the Institute's spring Landing the Value of Corporate Venturing course and taking advantage of the opportunity to work with mentors from programs like TDK Ventures, Shell Ventures, and Echo Health Ventures. We also will be offering our CVC Masterclass both in person in Palo Alto, London, and Tokyo, as well as live online. And we've launched a series of advanced investor modules with a super new CVC Board and Observer program that runs both in person and live online. And, we hope that you all have a wonderful holiday season, but we're looking forward to an exciting new year for the community. We hope to see you in Monterey, California for our flagship GCVI Summit in March, as well as the GCV Symposium in London. And stay tuned for our flagship conferences in Brazil and Tokyo, as well as more intimate GCV Connect gatherings for the community in different locations around the world. And we thank you again for joining us. We love your feedback. So for those of you who joined us live, please do take our survey and stay tuned for an email from us with a link to the summary article for this webinar, as well as the replay. And if you do want to get in touch with us, you can find Maya Palmer would be the chief editorial contact. Feel free to reach out to me for any professional development or benchmarking concerns, and or to Helen Seidenberg for commercial. So again, thank you for joining us, and we'll look forward to hopefully seeing you in January or future webinars. Thank you.